Hi, I'm Shauna.
And I'm Liz.
Welcome to Getting Bookish, a weekly podcast where we will talk about different book-related topics, let you know what we're reading, and even answer Q&As from you.
Be sure to visit our website, gettingbookish.com, and check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Getting Bookish. If you enjoy our podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a rating and review, which helps us to be seen by other book lovers.
With all that said, we hope you'll enjoy Getting Bookish with us.
Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on our very first podcast. Yay! And I am especially excited to share this with my friend Liz, and we just cannot wait to share this journey with you and explore what it means to be getting bookish.
Yeah, I am so excited. It's so much fun to discuss things with friends, to discuss books with friends, and just this whole journey of getting to start our own podcast has been so much fun. It's been a little crazy. You guys, bookish people don't tend to be like technical people when it comes to computer hardware, but other than that, but I'm excited to get down to the important stuff, which is talking about books and talking about getting bookish.
Yes. So what does getting bookish or just bookish mean to you? What is that your own definition of that?
I think for me, being bookish, I would define as reading books for pleasure, reading things that I love, just getting to enjoy books, whether it be fiction or nonfiction or whatever that might be. I think that that's what being bookish is. And I actually did look up like the actual definition for bookish, and I love the definition. I don't know if you've looked it up, but it says a person or way of life devoted to reading. And I was like, yes, I underlined it twice in my notes. I was like, yes, I am devoted to reading.
Yes.
Because I think that kind of just sums it up right there in that definition. When I think about being devoted, I think about making time for and being really purposeful in what I choose and
thinking about it all the time.
Yeah. And I think that as soon as you start thinking about it all the time, then you naturally want to start talking about it all the time.
Yes. And that's actually what led us to doing this podcast, because it was probably by this time, maybe 8 months ago, that you and I had this exceptionally long Marco Polo on books, and they were mainly about children's books, because I was talking about needing some new books for the kids, and being that you were a librarian, you had this plethora of knowledge, and we were just going back and forth, and then it kind of went on to what we like to read. And I swear this Marco Polo was like hours long, and I thought, I just love talking about books.
And I do too. There's something magical about reading, but then getting to share that experience with someone else is so much fun. And no, I think about those conversations and how I'm not sure I've ever left someone like that long if you guys aren't familiar with Marco Polo, it's kind of like this video text message where you leave like a whole video of yourself talking for someone else to watch. And they were so long because as soon as I started talking, I was like, oh, you have to read this. And then as soon as I would say that title, I'd be like, oh, now here's 30 other book titles that you have to read, because it goes right along with that.
I know, it was like we were doing our own podcast to each other, because you were talking and I was writing things down, and I was like, oh man, I need to share this with everybody. And thus the concept was kind of born from that. Yeah,
which was, how perfect, because it was developed in such a real way.
Organic way.
Yeah. That was the word I was looking for. But just it was very organic. We didn't have to be like, oh, let's do a podcast.
What do we talk about?
No, this is what we talk about all the time, my friends.
Books, absolutely. And like you had just said, there's something exciting about sharing somebody's excitement over what they're reading, whether it is something that I would necessarily read or a genre. When somebody is genuinely filled with joy to talk about something, you can't help but kind of feed off of that excitement, whether you're going to then read the book or not. It's fun to hear about this special world and these amazing characters that your friend or family has just stepped out of, and it's just exciting and fun.
It is, especially when someone has just read a book that they've loved, like
and
that
they're gushing.
passion. Oh yeah, I love to hear when someone is like, this was a 5-star book,
yeah,
and they just can't stop being excited about it. And I agree, even if it's something that I'm like, that's not a genre I would read, they make it sound so good because they're so excited about it. And that's what I love about these discussions, is reading is normally really solitary. Unless you're in like a formal book club, you normally don't talk to someone about what you're reading. And like even today, I was at the salon getting my hair done, and I mentioned a book I was reading, and then like all these people, because it's a pretty small salon, so everybody's really close to each other, and people were like, oh, I just read this, or oh, I was thinking about reading this. And it was so funny because I've never heard people talk about books at a hair salon before.
Yeah, right?
But it was so much fun because people are reading. We just don't talk about it that much because reading is a solitary hobby.
Right. And it's so fun because conversations like that, even if you are not a reader, it's fun to listen to the story and then interject your own feelings into their story or find out what happened next. So if you're telling a story about one of your books and I haven't even read a book in 10 years, I can still be excited about it and kind of interject my own opinion on what should have happened or what may be happening next. Or it's just this open-ended conversation, and I love it.
It is. And no one, like one of the ladies who was in there, she even mentioned, she's like, oh, I haven't read a book in such a long time. And no one was like, oh my goodness, she doesn't read. And I think that's because the people who were talking about reading, we were just so excited that when she was like, oh, I haven't read a book in a long time, like we were each like, oh, like I read this and it was like really good. And so we just made recommendations to her, which is super fun. I feel like that's the best way to make new book friends. It doesn't matter if they read all the time or not.
And I think books break boundaries. It doesn't matter what age you are, what gender, race, class, anything that you are, you find a book that we have in common, or you have a passion about whatever you're reading, and I'm like right there with you. And
yes.
Yeah. And I attend a literary society every month. We'll do a podcast on that in the future. But I have to say that I have not laughed as hard as I have laughed at that gathering in a really long time. I mean, even the last one that we were at, we were all laughing so hard. And if any of y'all are listening right here, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, we had tears. We could not even talk. And this is just a bunch of people getting together, talking about books. And it was one of the most fun nights I've had in such a long time. We had an absolute blast.
I love the idea of what you guys do, just coming together and talking about what you're reading rather than a book club, which everyone reads the same title, because that can oftentimes feel more like homework, especially if you're not interested in the book.
Right.
And like when I was in college, I was an English major, so we read constantly. But I wouldn't have considered myself bookish at that point because I wasn't reading things I wanted to read.
Right.
I wasn't necessarily, I mean, I was enjoying them and we got to discuss them, and that has its own merits and is really fun, but it's not the same as sitting down and reading something you're excited about.
Yes. You can't pretend to be passionate about something. And as soon as somebody gives you an assignment to read, I feel like even if it was a book that you had intended to read anyway, as soon as it's an assignment and there's questions and you have to dissect it and you have to do writings on it, it takes that joy out of it. I mean, you still might enjoy the book, but you're not reading it the same way you would if you just picked it off the shelf because that's what you wanted to read next.
Right, because in the back of your mind, you're still like, oh, this is an assignment. Mm-hmm. I have to get this done. It's due by this certain day. I have to be, paying attention to certain things so that I could go into class and like bring something to our conversation. And so there's just there's this pressure. Whereas when you just sit down to read, there's normally no pressure. You just get to relax and enjoy. And that's the best part.
And we also want people to understand that they don't have to be ashamed of what they're reading. And meaning if they're not reading the latest bestseller or this well-known classic or some gigantic life-changing book, that's okay. If they're just reading, that's all we want. We just want people to read.
Exactly. And you won't hear us debate whether like certain types of books or certain ways of reading, audiobooks or Kindle or physical books. We will be doing a podcast on this because I think the topic is so interesting. And it's really interesting when people get passionate about what's the quote right way to read a book. But there's just so many exciting bookish topics out there that I'm super excited to discuss.
Yes. And we are also going to be going through 1,000 books to read before you die. Yep, by James Mustick, I think it is. Mustich? Mustick.
I think it's Mustick.
We're going to go with that.
Yeah.
And we just briefly show that book because not that we're going to go through that and it's a particular challenge and we're going to try to read all the books this year because that would be impossible. But it is a great thing to look through, especially if you are not a current avid reader and you don't know what to read. That is a great book to pick up and kind of look through and get some ideas. Because if you're not a reader, you may think you don't like to read or reading is boring. And that hurts our ears.
It's true, though, because I think that a lot of times, like, we see, oh, it's a bestseller. Like, I'll pick that up and read it, and it'll be good. And then you pick it up and you try to read it, and you make this assumption in your mind, oh, I don't like to read because I'm not enjoying this. Mm-hmm. But bestsellers are oftentimes mysteries or thrillers.
Yeah, that's not my genre.
I just don't like that genre. That's not my genre. I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want nightmares.
Right. Occasionally, I will pick one up. In fact, I'm not going through a thriller, I guess. It's more like a mystery, but it's not my go-to. And so I've gone through a couple different genres, and I've settled in historical fiction and memoirs, and I love them. I'm just obsessed, and I can't read enough of them, and I'm just hoarding them all.
It's not hoarding if it's books.
Right. And you are usually in...
YA fantasy is my preferred genre. Possibly fantasy in general. I think I've actually started reading some more adult fantasy. So it's not just YA, but that's my genre of choice right now. And it's not that that's always been. I used to read a lot of historical fiction and I read a lot of nonfiction in the past. But right now, I just can't get enough YA fantasy.
And that's the great part is that you will never run out of choices for that. And if you wake up one day and you think, you know what? I don't want to read any more YA. I want to read romance novels. That's totally fine. Just because you've been married to one genre for so long doesn't mean that you just can't flip-flop or switch altogether. And that's why I love talking to other people about books, because you get such a different perspective from so many people that it can open your eyes to maybe books or genres or whatever that you never thought about before.
Yes. That's why I'm excited about our challenges conversation, our podcast that's coming up, because that's what's so fun about those challenges is that they introduce some different ideas to you.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us. Before we go, we want to let you know that you can listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts, or you can join us on YouTube where you can see us and the books and things that we are showing. We'll be updating both of those on Tuesdays.
Every week we will release a new podcast on a different topic. And the last podcast of every month is going to be one of my favorites, because it's going to be the update of the books we have read for that month, what we are currently reading, and what we are planning on choosing for our next pick, which we would love your opinions on. And we'll post pictures of that to our Facebook page to have you guys vote and give us any opinions you might have.
I'm super excited for everyone's opinions. I am so excited for our journey together, Shauna.
Me too. I'm so excited to be talking about books with such a great friend. And also, we will be having some special guests. So please join us on our journey, listen to our podcast, and don't forget to subscribe and leave ratings and reviews so that we can be seen by other people who are searching for Bookish podcasts.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with us. Don't forget to check us out on social media and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any of the fun. See you next week.